As much as you may love your home country or love living in your home country, it can be hard to put an actual monetary value on your citizenship. What is the value of your home country's passport? Even if you're not a patriot, there are so many subjective factors that are really hard to evaluate. So today I'm going to give you 4 factors that I think about when it comes to what's the value of citizenship, where I was born, do I want to keep this citizenship, and how am I going to adapt as I go through my nomad capitalist journey. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson. I'm the founder of Nomad Capitalist, where we help 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally go where you're treated best. Everything from second passports, legal offshore tax reduction, overseas investments. You can learn more at nomadcapitalist.com. And so what I want to talk about today is the value of a citizenship itself. What is the value, not so much of the travel document, because we've seen just how much that can be affected by changing forces in the world over the last year or so. But what is the actual value of citizenship? I remember writing an article many years ago about how citizenship has rights and citizenship has responsibilities. One of the things that we've seen in the last year is, in my mind, far fewer rights. You can't leave your country, for example. You can't come back to your country in some extreme examples like Australia. We've seen countries that are supposedly bastions of freedom that have really cracked down and said, you know, you don't get the benefits of citizenship, but yet there are so many more responsibilities. Whether it's taxes going up, new forms to file, new things that you need to do. You know, for me, the value of citizenship, especially in the high-tax legacy brand countries of the West, has been diminished. And so what I don't want to talk about is, oh, but Australia has a great passport. Again, that's true. You can go to many countries with an Australian passport, more than most. But to me, the value for the vast majority of people, you know, visa-free travel can be replaced. It's rather agnostic. You know, perhaps it's harder to replace visa-free travel to Australia or New Zealand, to the US and Canada, but on a global level, visa-free travel can largely be replaced through a passport portfolio. And quite frankly, the average person is not looking to go to 170 countries in the world anyway. So let's talk about the value of the citizenship. And the question I'm going to ask is, well, what happens if you didn't have the citizenship? Now, I'm presuming people watching this aren't having their citizenship stripped for joining ISIS. So let's assume that you just were weighing the decision to renounce your citizenship. Often this decision is made by American citizens because the US is effectively the only country, at least for now, that has this system of worldwide taxation, which means not only do you need to pay, subject to a number of exclusions and exemptions and all that, which we do help Americans legally reduce their taxes by moving overseas, but you also have to file. You also have to, go through all the regulatory requirements and all the paperwork requirements, and you can't do certain things in your business overseas because you're an American. There's certain acts and laws you need to follow. Even if that's different than where you're living, the US says, hey, as an American, that's what you have to do. And so I would ask myself, if I'm an American, obviously the most tangible thing is, what is the actual cost of the taxes? If I am making millions of dollars a year as an American, I'm running a business, I'm still going to pay some tax in many cases, right? And so, hey, if I make $5 million a year and I pay $500,000 in tax, is that worth it? Is it worth it? So let's go through the factors that might make it worth it. And if you're not an American, you can still follow along, because there may come a time when your country does the same thing and imposes some kind of global taxation on you that you can't just leave. Other countries have increasingly done that in a more de facto way by saying that leaving the tax net as a resident is more difficult. Some countries have systems where you can't leave the tax net for the first 1 or 2 or 3 years after you depart. You've got to keep paying even though you're not living there. Other countries restrict where you can move. There's a lot of restrictions, again, especially on Western citizens, for how do you get out of their net, whether it's taxes, regulations, paperwork, what have you. Okay, so here are the 4 things, because what a citizen does, or what a citizen has, is basically unlimited access. It's an all-you-can-eat buffet pass. If you're a citizen, you're entitled to a passport. You can come and go from your country, in theory, anytime you want. Again, we've seen that kind of disrupted over the last year. The first thing to consider is the ability to work in your country. This is why a lot of Western citizens, of course, love the idea of having an American or a Canadian or a British passport, because if you are an employee, or even if you're a freelancer in some cases, you want to go out and get a job, you want to go out and get gigs, you're going to get paid a lot more living in Los Angeles than you are living in Lagos. right? And so the passport allows you to do that. You have permission to work. You can move all around freely. You can do whatever you need to do. You don't have to worry about work permits and all that kind of stuff. And of course, you're able to come into the country and spend all your time there, so you can do as much work there as possible. So definitely if you're an employee, again, some independent contractors, self-employed also could benefit from this, then that's a benefit. Obviously, what people we talk to a lot are business owners, especially location independent business owners, or at least those who can leave their business with a manager, as well as investors, whether it's crypto, day trading, whatever the case may be. Obviously, someone who can do their job from anywhere has a lot less need for a citizenship because they don't need to be there. They don't need the access to higher paying wages, the ability just to get a job, and politicians that potentially in some cases fight for their ability to get jobs, bring in better paying jobs, that kind of thing. So number one is, do I need to work? What's the value of that? If I am, listen, I've had people who are dual American and British or dual American and European, and they want to get rid of the US part, and then they realize, well, where I live in Europe, I may get paid a little bit less. Obviously, it's not the difference between Los Angeles and Lagos, and they can evaluate, what are the compliance costs, what is everything involved in the U.S. side, and is it worth, $5,000 a year or $10,000 a year extra? You can decide that. The other issue is just the ability to live in your country, right? So this is something that obviously the vast majority of people born in a country, especially Western countries, legacy brand countries, they like to live there. It's where they want to live. They don't want to go anywhere else. They want to travel domestically. Maybe they take a vacation every once in a while overseas, but they want to live in the country. And so again, if you were to give up your citizenship or lost your citizenship in some way, you would not have that ability to do it. People often ask, hey, if I give up my U.S. citizenship, how do I come back? Depends on what passport you have. You could get a tourist visa. You could use ESTA and come back for 90 days at a time. You could get other types of visas. But is 90 days a year enough? Is 90 days at a time enough? Is whatever, the country that you would be leaving, whatever access you would have? Obviously, the other issue is there's no certainty to that. Anyone can be turned away at a border, right? And so most countries that you go to, they don't bother you too much. If you have visa-free travel, you have visa-free travel. There are a couple countries that ask you some questions. What are you doing here? How long are you staying? And so, especially if you're leaving one of these English-speaking, big Western countries, and you want to go back, understand, I don't think I've seen almost anyone who, has a Swiss passport or a French passport or a New Zealand passport have problems going back to the US. But nothing's 100% guaranteed, because if you're not a citizen, you are at the mercy of the border officials. And obviously, not having a citizenship means unless you get a residence permit, which, potentially negates the reasons why you left in the first place, whether it's tax, regulatory, etc., you can't live there as long as you want, okay? And so, high tax country residence permits, not as great as some of the more agnostic residence permits we talk about. Now, let's talk about number 3. Okay, Andrew, I don't need a job. That's great. I run a business. I can move it offshore. All set there. I don't care about living in my country. People especially tell me this after they've already lived overseas for a number of years. I have one friend who says, there's so many more places than just the United States. There's so many places to explore, and I happen to agree. But number 3, I'd like people to visit my family and friends. Now, what will happen here is, this is something where people want to come back for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. They want to come back for a wedding, or they want to come back for a funeral, or whatever happens. And so, obviously, what I would say is, this has been difficult for some people over the last year with COVID, where I saw someone on social media recently say, I just got to see my father for the first time. We live in the same city, but I just got to see him for the first time in a year. So the idea that living in the same country necessarily ensures your ability to see family, we've seen how that's just not true in the last year. But I think what people have to understand is, generally when you want to come back and visit a country, you either have access to the country or you don't. There's no tourist visa for, I'm just going to a funeral. Because the border agent doesn't accompany you from the airport to the funeral, make sure that's all you do, and then take you back to the plane and get you out. If you get a tourist visa, they're generally issued on pretty similar conditions. I understand that in the United States, consular officers are generally supposed to issue 10-year visas. You're supposed to get a 10-year visa or you're not. Now, I know people who've gotten 1 year or 3 years, that kind of thing, but in a lot of the embassies, it's supposed to be, is this person going to be okay to let them go in and out for the next 10 years? And so there's no such thing as, I just want to go for a wedding. Great. then get the regular tourist visa, get the regular access. Now, again, if you're giving up or losing citizenship in a country that has a pretty easy visa regime, then you should probably not have a lot of problems. If you're giving up citizenship of a country with a difficult visa regime, then this could potentially be a problem because, again, there's no special category. But what I would encourage is what I've had people do is, let's say you're from the US. Why don't you get your family a residence permit in Mexico next door or in Portugal, kind of a short flight across? Maybe there's a way to bring some of the family into this where I've had people, and I was talking to some people recently where I said, how often do you see your family? They said, probably twice a year. I said, for twice a year, for all the money you're saving, all the peace of mind you're gaining, all the lifestyle improvements you're going to get, wouldn't it just be better to fly them to see you in Europe? And so perhaps you have things like the Portugal Golden Visa. You can add your parents, for example, if they're 65 or older. Other programs allow you to add family members, or you could even, for some of the cheaper programs, like a Latin American program, you could just get them their own residence. I mean, if they have a job or if they're in school or whatever, they can probably just qualify on their own. And then why don't you guys meet in that place a couple times a year? We have so much technology these days, the ability to communicate with people, that perhaps that's the same way you're communicating with them when you're in the same city or state as you're calling them, or the same territory. But I think, being able to be flexible and bringing people to you, not a bad idea. What I've also said is, when it comes to friends, you will see when you go overseas who your real friends are. I've never been a big fan of living in denial. If someone really doesn't want to spend time with me, I will pay sometimes. Hey man, I'll buy your flight. Come on over. I'm having a birthday party and wherever. Okay, come on over. Let me get you a hotel, whatever it may be. You can make people's lives easier. But and I understand we all have things to do, but if someone can't come and see you for 5 years or 10 years, as I often hear, they probably weren't that into the relationship in the first place. So I think that's maybe one benefit where this just kind of lays bare the reality. The last thing to consider is just access to return to your country for the little things. So obviously family and friends are the big things. But again, I go back to whatever it is that may come up, whether it's you need to deal with some kind of financial institution, or you're involved in a will or a trust or whatever, just whatever could come up. What is going to be your access if you cannot go back to the country for just little stuff that crops up? Because again, there's no special category. He just needs to come and give some documents to the bank in terms of coming in. You can either come in or you can't. And so those are 4 factors I want you to think about. And what I want you to do is add those up versus the tax savings, peace of mind, lifestyle benefits, cost of living reduction, if that exists. Figure out what are all those 4 factors worth to me, because that's what your citizenship is basically buying you. Again, if you're US or Canadian or Australian or German, yes, I understand you've got better visa-free travel than someone with a St. Lucian passport. I would argue not substantially better. Most people I talk to who are leaving the US for good are not super worried that they need a visa to go to Canada in the future. They're like, I'll be fine. If you're from Canada, maybe you're not worried about needing a visa for New Zealand or something. But the passport itself, the travel privileges can be recreated. Maybe it means occasionally you're going and you're getting a visa that costs $36 and you're waiting in line for an hour. Okay, add that into the cost. Time and money all count. But citizenship for me is access, that unlimited pass to a country that I think more people than realize it could replace by going where they're treated best, having people come to them, and taking care of the stuff that their country offers them somewhere else. That's why it's so important to have your own income source, having your own business, having your own investments, and having your own flexibility in your personal life. How can Nomad Capitalist help you? 4 ways. Number 1, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell to make sure you get our new video every day. Number 2, get a copy of Nomad Capitalist, the book. You'll learn a lot of my personal experiences over a dozen years of studying this stuff, as well as exactly some of the strategies that you can use to build your Nomad Capitalist plan. Number 3, if you're not sure where to start, but you want to come and learn from my team and I, you want to come and mingle with like-minded people, learn more about our live conference, Nomad Capitalist Live. It's coming up soon. And number 4, if you want some help right now because you've got a burning issue, you need something solved, you want to lower your taxes, get a second passport, or build the Nomad Capitalist lifestyle of your dreams, go to nomadcapitalist.com and click on Become a Client.